I'd like to now move us into the main part of our program by introducing our speaker, David Peterson. David Peterson is one of the founders and former CEO of North Highland Company. North Highland was founded in 1992 by Peterson and provides consulting services in a number of different industries: financial services, healthcare, retail, public sector, and many others. When Peterson founded North Highland Company, he wanted to provide a different type of consultancy, one where the clients would have the right mix of local consultants with their knowledge, their detailed knowledge of the clients, and national experts who have that deep industry expertise. He created a sense of ownership for all the employees of the company. Dave led North Highland for 13 years. That was a period of very rapid growth and expansion of U.S. offices. Prior to North Highland, Dave held management positions with Ernst Young, Georgia Pacific, and American Airlines. He's a frequent speaker on improving customer service across industry value chains, and he's served on a number of boards of directors, including the Rotary and some nonprofits. In fact, just over breakfast, we were chatting about adult literacy and the good work that the organization he's affiliated with now, Literacy Action, has been doing as the largest provider of adult literacy in the metro Atlanta area. So good work with that. I understand he's now also involved in a small beer brewing company here located in Atlanta. So he continues to do some exciting things with his career. Dave was named by Atlanta Business Chronicle as one of the 100 leaders in Georgia's technology industry. He's a graduate of Wharton with a BS in economics, and he holds an MBA in finance from the University of Florida. So please join me in welcoming Dave Peterson.
Art, thank you so much. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here. And I don't want to correct my my host, but it was not American Airlines. It was the other AA company, Arthur Andersen. But they're not around anymore, so they won't complain. So I want to introduce two special friends of mine that are here. I see other employees, former employees and friends. But first, my wife, Susan, is here. And I would think she would get enough of me at home, but she's come early, and glad to have you here. And my partner, Jim Rogers. We work together on the literacy program. He's another consultant in diversity and in talent. And we started writing a book together a few years ago, and I bailed, and he's finishing it. So it'll be out soon, The Language of Business, Keeping It Simple. So hopefully anything you like here, you maybe find some of it plus more in Jim's book. So they asked to come and give some thoughts about my career and a consultant, so I thought I'd tell you what a consultant is. So there's a lot of definitions. One is it's someone who takes your watch to tell you what time it is and then keeps the watch. Another is it's a woman who comes in to be part of the solution for a problem and stays long enough to become part of the problem. And my personal favorite, a consultant, is someone who knows is a man who knows 1,000 different ways to make love but doesn't know any women. So I'm not any of those. I was a supply chain consultant, and with a background in finance, the question is, how did you get in the supply chain? And it was just one of those things. I was assigned to it, had to swim fast for a while, and actually discovered I loved it. It was so complicated, so complex. So I'm going to weave some of those thoughts about what I learned along the way in. Yes, I now have invested in a brewery. My good friend got me into it, said you can make a small fortune in the brewery business. He forgot to tell me you need a large fortune to start it. And then I'm very much committed to adult literacy as part of our ecosystem, because the first teacher of a child, early learning is very important, is the parent. And if you have a low literate adult, then the child suffers. And we unfortunately have about a third of our adults in Georgia that have basically are functionally illiterate. So it doesn't bode well for the schools. And when we struggle, we spend $20 billion in the state on public education, and a lot of it, in effect, is remediation. And we need more remediation. We just need it done at both the adult level and the early learning level. So if you want to ask about that, please do. I have a lot of passion on it. So one of the things I've observed as being a consultant for coming on 40 years is what I call patterns in the business. And so I'm going to share with you some musings about these. And musings were, I started writing them about 15 years ago in the company as I started to have a little more time to be reflective. Most of the time it was go, 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 go. You got a project due, you got a proposal due, you got something to deal with. But as I had a little more time to reflect, I started looking at the patterns that I'd seen over time. And so that's kind of what I want to share with you. So the first couple are maybe for the students or recent graduates of the university. Show up, work hard, be nice. It seems obvious, but it's really not. Lots of times you can, phone it in, text it in, but you have to show up. I was interviewing for a job when I got out of college, graduate school, and the guy said, "We're not hiring, but you showed up and knocked on my door. I'm going to talk to you." And he made me an offer. So one of my advices, recommendations, is to go out, show up, be nice. Let them see you sweat. It's okay. You're supposed to be working hard. And then be nice to the people. This is a team-based sport. Business is a team-based sport, so it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to offer to help. We say in our company, you want to surprise and delight your client. Delight them by doing what they ask you to do, and surprise them by doing something a little bit more. And I think that's a recommendation for all of us in business, is do your job, but be prepared to do a little more. And in fact, I think everybody has two jobs right now. The job you were hired for and the job that your business is becoming and asking you to do. And the higher up in the organization, the more time you spend on the next iteration of an enterprise. So yes, you got the work to do, you got the customers you got to serve today, but so much work now is being spent in improving the business, changing the business, growing the business. So look around your job and find out what's the other job that you really should be engaged in, because there's really two out there. And the more you work on the next job, the more you're positioning your career for that future part. Second thought, what problem are you really trying to solve? One of the things I saw as a consultant was clients expressing a need, a problem, but it may not have been a problem. It was a symptom of a problem. So we would ask why, and the famous Japanese phrase, ask why 5 times. Because when you dig a little deeper, you find out that there's really some driver down there that's not always obvious, but that's maybe where the real problem is, where the real opportunity is. We used to have a little cartoon in our break room, and it was a 2-panel cartoon, this guy standing behind a booth, and it had information, $1. And then it had the other panel that said, information you need, $500. And I think that's the message, is you really got to understand what's needed, and so you've got to dig a little deeper. Is it the symptom? Is it a fact? So as I started getting involved in manufacturing and distribution and retail and all the product flows, I started to see this pattern being repeated. And so a problem in one place could often be displaced somewhere else. But when you took a little step back, you saw that. So the analogy I often use is what I call the beach ball analogy. You hold up a beach ball to your face. What color is the beach ball? Well, it's the color of the side that's facing you. Let's say it's a green beach ball on that side. But if you pull it back a little bit, try to get some context, you say, oh, gee, well, there's some white over there and some red. And if you start spinning it around, you start to see there's a lot of different colors. And so maybe the perspective that you have will influence the answer you come up with, which is part of the challenge, which is why we often have disagreements, because we're looking at one side of the beach ball, someone's looking at the other, and we're arguing about it. And I think one of the challenges is to understand and have empathy for the other side of the perspective. I was at Georgia Pacific for a number of years, and I was in building products. They made plywood and lumber and particle board, and I was sent to one of the mills out in Crossett, Arkansas, one of the biggest plywood mills in the U.S. at the time. And they would produce about 1,000, well, the whole company produced 1,000 railroad cars of plywood a week. And this mill had about 100 railroad cars a week of production. But there was something going on, and they sent me to look at it. And I went out there because there was no inventory reported by this mill. And I walked out there, and I'm standing in about 50,000 square feet of storage, just stacked to the gills of inventory, plywood. And I said, well, what's this? Is that not inventory? Oh, no, that's not inventory. What is it? Well, that's surplus production. Ah, okay. So the challenge is you still have to sell that surplus production, but by not calling it inventory, then they don't have the control, they didn't have the communication, so defining what it was. We also were asked a few years ago to help a major pharmaceutical company with a customer relationship management system. It's fancy software, keeping track of your customers. When did you call them? What do they like? You know, pricing information, things like this. We spent a little time trying to understand what system might work, and the team came back and said, I don't think they're ready for a CRM system. They've got some fundamental flaws in the way their Salesforce territory, their compensation program, and all kinds of things. So sometimes we wound up spending a lot of time helping them there, getting to a CRM system 3 or 4 years later. So you got to solve the right problem, or again, you just spin your wheels and you don't make progress. Headlines. You know, in your career, you'll often encounter managers, executives, that don't have a lot of time. They have a very short attention span, and you've got to figure out how to make your message known quickly. One of the advice I used to give consultants is have a headline in the first 2 minutes that is a real attention grabber, because you don't know if the key executive in the meeting is going to get called out, and I've seen that happen. You start talking and boom, they get called away. And you want them to come back and go, wow, that was interesting. So I suggest that you have a way of framing whatever you've done, whatever you're going to recommend, into a headline. When Governor Perdue took over as the first Republican governor back about 10 years ago, after 130 years of Democrats, it was a chance to shake things up. So he called in a bunch of consulting companies, asked for some pro bono work, and we signed up to help him with asset management and procurement of assets in the state. And we set aside a team of about 5 folks to go look at what the state was doing in buying and managing their assets. And they came in, they were having a presentation with the governor a couple days later. They came in to present to me, and I was falling asleep. It was painful to listen to all the issues and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, condense it. What's the headline here? And they struggled, and they hemmed and they hawed, and I was pressuring them to really tell me what the issue was. And finally, someone says, Dave, the state has $10 billion in assets and don't know where they are. That's the headline. So that's how they started, and that got the governor's attention. And then suddenly, a lot of things that all those detailed recommendations lined up around the headline, and they were able to make some progress on that. It's about people. You know, we think about corporations as these large monolithic entities, but they're really made up of people, and they're made up of people doing work. And those business processes affect people inside the company, and they affect some outside the company. You have these trading partners. You have suppliers that supply you goods and services, and you have customers that buy your goods and services, and sometimes who buys your goods and services, not the end consumer. And so I've always asked to understand the supply chain, or the value chain if you're in a service business. Who do you interact with, and who's your customer, and who's the customer's customer, and who's the end consumer? And sometimes by asking that question, you will get some interesting answers, different than if you just stopped at, well, what goes on inside our walls. I remember one company that we looked at, they were a big company growing industrial products, and they discovered, or we helped them discover, that about half of their customers were generating over 600% profit. And the other half of their customers were generating minus 500% customers, and they'd make more money if they just fired about half their customers. Well, that's not very popular among sales, but when they started thinking about it, it's because the people relationships got in the way of really a good business relationship. So they were doing the right thing by understanding people, but they weren't doing the right thing by understanding how people can often make bad decisions because they're their friends. Well, just because they're their friends, you can't price below market, price below cost. The famous sign is, well, we price below cost because we buy below cost. I never quite got that one, but that's an accounting answer. So you treat people with respect, they'll respect you, and recognize there's all kinds of people that you work with, and bring the whole job, or bring your whole person to the job, and life will be better. This is where now, in the consulting business, if I think back all the issues that I had as CEO, and I've seen the business, we've grown very well. 3 of us started the company. Now we have 1,000 employees, plus an international partnership of 3,000 in 25 countries. Most of our issues are about people. And so whenever I was having to deal with issues, one of my favorite sayings when I boiled down what the real problem was, it's not about you. because often we get so individually, again, our beach ball, we're so worried about our view, our money, our job, our role, our reporting relationships, that we forgot we're in business for a customer, for a client. And when we boil down those issues and we get away from the you part, suddenly we can start looking at what the real cause is. So we ask our folks to take this little test. And the question is, think of the best manager you ever worked for and try to describe how they managed you and understand what their motives, their values, their enthusiasm, their competency, their style, their integrity was, and really kind of evaluate them. Now, assume someone's working for you. How will they evaluate you on those same dimensions? Ooh, that's scary. Because we all know what great leadership looks like when we encounter it. We may not be as self-critical ourselves when we are asked about those questions. I was asked to counsel a woman who was a very talented person in our company, but was creating some people issues. And I had been briefed about her behavior. She was the kind of person who really didn't listen well and was always had her own personal agenda. So I'm kind of having this conversation, and basically I'm saying, this isn't working for us, and if this doesn't get resolved right away, you're going to have to leave. She said, thanks for that input. By the way, I've got a couple other items I want to talk to you about. I was like, okay, well, that's just demonstration of the fact that you're on your agenda, you're not listening to what's really important. So it's not about you. That's a very Zen kind of session, because again, if you want to be a leader, it's about you, but a leader, it's not about you. Leaders get results through other people. Leaders don't just build businesses. Leaders build leaders who build businesses. And this is an important thing. All right, now shifting a little bit in terms of musings to everybody. Think big, do small. Think globally, act locally. There's a lot to be said for this. And I've seen some big companies, come up with these great ideas, these great rollout strategies. We're going to change this. When I was at Georgia Pacific, we had 140 distribution centers where they're going to change all the systems, change all the procedures, and it was going to be fantastic. And my comment was, have you done one yet? No, we haven't done one. We're going to do 140. Here, do one. Do one in a row. See how it works, and you'll learn something. You'll learn something about the rollout. You'll learn something about the bigger strategy. And so I use this quite frequently. And it also brings up what I call the Gazzetta Rules. What goes into this? So being a production guy, you have a bill of material. So here are the things, the components that go into making a product. But here are the things that takes the product and goes into the box, because you can't just ship. Who has an iPhone here? Everyone going? So about how many parts are in that iPhone? Anyone take a guess how many individual components are in that iPhone? 3,000? You're a little high, but good guess. 20? You're a little low. A couple hundred, yeah, 180 or so. If you think of all the chips and dials on the boards and things like this. How many lines of code? Well, how many apps do you have? So there's a lot of Gazzetta into that little iPhone. And so you can see it in the production world. What are the Gazzetta rules to make a product? But what goes into the success if you're in the service business? My friend Peter Pomeroy from Bank of North Georgia. What goes into the successful banking relationship? Well, it's not just that there's a bank and they offer checking and loans and things like this. It's the personal touch. It's the things that add value to the customer, the way the customer wants to have value added to them. And so you need to know your Gazzetta rules. Now, in the manufacturing space, those are often very complicated. I grew up in the early era of computerizing manufacturing planning and control systems. Before that, it was done on, green bar paper. And I got involved with some of the early generation software, learned things about bills of material, and so on. And I remember a company that was in the printing business. They had staff that really wanted to use the changing of their manufacturing system with a new bill of material processor, a recipe manager, if you will. And they had a bright team that wanted to clean things up. So they had all their bills of materials for the existing colors of their printed products. But the team said, let's change some of those. So they made, and I'm making the number up, the number one item used to be black, but we're going to make it white. And therefore number two used to be white, now we'll make it black. And 3 was red, we'll make it green. do you see the chaos that would happen when they start changing all the codes, because all the Gazzetta Rules were going to be changed? Well, they realized they had made the mistake, and so they then undid it by doing a change all back. So in the meantime, this data is being just destroyed. When you're in charge, you've got to juggle, and the only species on Earth that can juggle is human species. Juggling balls, and we all juggle. We juggle multiple jobs. We juggle family life. We juggle our hobbies and things like this. So some of the best jugglers get to be CEOs, because they're not only juggling their balls, they're helping other people juggle all those balls out there. And you get a different perspective when you see that. And so that's where leadership and situational leadership comes in. There's a term in the steeplechase horse business called horses for courses. The different horses run well on different courses. And the same is true with leaders, that not all leaders are designed to run startups. Not all leaders are designed to run turnarounds. Not all leaders are designed to run big corporations. So know your course, where you are, and focus in on there. While it's always nice to do something different, sooner or later you got to decide where you're going to gain that level of expertise and make sure you know where you're good. Where is your strategic place in the business and in the industry? And this can be both a personal question, where do you sit in the organization? Who are your customers? Not just the end customers of your business, but the customers you serve within your business. How do you make them happy? That may be the next department. So if you're in the buying organization, you're buying for departments that need products and services and things like that. So consider what that may look like, because that's where you can really improve the value of the company. I often come back to Coca-Cola. North Highland's had a great 20-plus year run serving Coca-Cola. They're an amazing company to work with, and they're a hard company to work with because they're so good. Sometimes it's easy being a consultant when you walk in, it's a mess, because anything you do is an improvement. But you work with Coca-Cola, and it's really hard because they've thought through a lot of this stuff, and what you're dealing with is not necessarily fixing things. I think consultants who think I'm going to go fix the Coca-Cola company won't last long out there. I think if you can say, here's how I can help you, and here's your issues, and ask the right question 5 times, you really have a chance to serve. Something I notice in the beer business, Red Brick Brewing is my company, so please, next time you go and ask, you're at a bar or restaurant, ask for Red Brick. Whether you want it or not, just ask for it. We need a little demand here, and hopefully. So one of the things that I've discovered is we have this capacity. We put money and built out this plant, so we have a lot of fixed costs. And craft beer, we use higher grade grains and ingredients and things like that. So the variable cost is high. So we have a very low margin in our business. And so we manage our cash because we're trying to sell our capacity off. And in fact, I've told the folks, we don't sell beer, we sell capacity. So as we think about managing our business, we're really trying to manage units of capacity. And therefore, if it works, it drives cash. And cash is often, in a small business, not there. And so the cost of cash, the cost of capital is very high. Larger companies, they've got good financing and cash gets lower, but often people in the company don't realize where that cash is spent, and they make a lot of decisions that can influence cash. So I worked with a company a few years ago that made various kinds of garage doors. And their business model was based upon 8 weeks of inventory. Well, for all items. Well, you can't keep 8 weeks of garage doors around. You just can't produce that many and have them on stock. And you can't worry about 8 weeks of little washers and bolts because it's just the inventory cost of maintaining it is too high. So we came back with a recommendation. You keep about 2 weeks of doors on hand and constantly replenish them. As soon as you sell one, replenish it because the factory can provide it. Keep about 8 weeks of the middle parts, the rails and the motors and things like this. And all the nuts and bolts and screws, who cares? Have 30 weeks, have 60 weeks. Now, I saw one client that had 18,000 days of material on hand, and I asked them, how did you wind up with this? Oh, we got a great deal. So how much cash was invested in that? What's the return on investment on 18,000 days of inventory? It was pretty low. Oh, this brings up another favorite topic of mine. Now that I've kind of stepped back and gotten mellow in my old age, I often read the newspaper and see what's, yeah, Susan's laughing, see what's going on in our town. And I'm friends with the people that have been helping the new trolley go in downtown. And I'm glad we're going to do something for our visitors to connect them with the Martin Luther King Center and the Centennial Park. But a fixed trolley? I mean, this is kind of a century-old technology. And when they first announced it was going to be a $70 million project. When they started construction, it was an $80 million project. I just saw a couple weeks ago it's going to be $99 million when it's done. And, you know, it's not done yet. And it won't make money. It'll lose money. And I think about, why do we put all this fixed cost, this fixed cash into this business? Why not create a variable model? My wife and I were just up in Canada last year. We went to Quebec City. And they had a whole series of these little electric buses going around. The electric bus costs $4 a day on power. Yes, you have a driver, but you can buy a lot of those buses. And I was thinking, you know, if the state had put this out to bid for some public-private partnership, we could have done a lot better, a lot faster, a lot cheaper, and it still will lose money, but it'll lose a lot less money, and therefore the burn rate of the $99 million you could put into cash could have satisfied that service for a long time. When I see challenges with companies, it falls into my ninth musing, that the big issues can be solved with time, money, and leadership. And unfortunately, we often throw money at it as a solution, just as my example with the trolley system. So what you really have to have is leaders that will, you know, go a little deeper, think a little harder. And when you don't do that, and I also have seen companies that were not well run, and usually it boils down to leadership or rules that, you know, family started when the business started 100 years ago. No one's asked, does that still make sense? So sometimes you have to challenge it. And then finally, if you're going to be, whether you're going to be a CEO or an analyst or a salesperson or a banker or whatever you're going to do, how do you have a life? So I had an opportunity to be part of a business group when I was running North Highland. And one of the speakers, Walter Sutton, had a book out called Leap of Strength. And it was his journey as a CEO to find self-fulfillment. And he had an idea that I started, and his was to have a 2-day retreat. Go away, no distractions, no golf clubs. If you use your computer, it's because you're going to do work on this project. You're not going to be surfing the internet and checking on things. And for the first day, go think about everything you want to do in your life, kind of a bucket list, but also it can be goals and objectives, dealing with relationships, places you want to go to, and list that all out, first day. Second day, start looking at that list and organizing it into patterns or dimensions or categories, whatever works for you, and see what shakes out. One of the big surprises to me when I first did this, I had a gazillion things I wanted to do in the company. And I have twin daughters, and it was spend more time with daughters. Ooh, that says something right there, that the list wasn't very long. And so as I started thinking about my dimensions of my life, I realized I was out of balance. And so I proceeded to start making some changes, and I've gone through this process. I started in 1999, and I've done it every year since. I get away for 2 days with my notes from last year, what I've done, what I haven't done, ideas, and kind of rebalance, if you will. And that has allowed me to kind of find my center and also realize that, you know, I loved running a company, but there are other people chomping at the bit to do it better, and they've done it better. I'm involved with some community service work, and I'm having a blast doing that. And it's caused me to rethink that. So that's something that I'll suggest to you is have a life and go do a 2-day retreat every year. See what that brings you, because it may put you on the start of finding out who the real is, who the real you is down in there somewhere. So those are some musings. I wanted to leave some time for questions, so I'd be happy to talk about whatever is on your mind.
As you ask questions, we've got some microphones. This is being recorded for our podcast. It's also a large room, so if you ask a question with a microphone, we'll be able to hear you across the room.
I said it's a mistake probably videotaping this meeting. People have told me I have the face for radio, so I don't know about the podcast. No.
Hey, Dave, there are a lot of consulting companies out there. What do you attribute the success of North Highland and the tremendous growth that you've had? What would you say was the main factor that drove that?
Well, I think it is this focusing on people. One of the reason for starting the company was I was a consultant with Ernst Young. Coca-Cola was my account, and I did a project for them, and I was away for a couple weeks. I came back from Europe, and one of my daughters, twin daughters, they were about 2.5 at the time. One of them looked at me, looked at her mother, and goes, "Does Daddy still live here?" Man, yeah, it really hit home. So within about 6 months, 3 of us had started the business because we wanted to do what we like doing. Consulting is a fabulous business, but the lifestyle is killer. So we committed we were not going to travel. And that allowed us to do some things that meant we could not do some things. But we adapted and we grew the business, and we discovered within a few years that because of this being able to focus on the client in the same town, we were there at 8 o'clock on Monday morning. We were there at 5 o'clock on Friday night. The clients started saying, "You guys are different. You're nicer. You're not as angry." And that's why I always felt a lot of consultants were angry because they had to be ripped out, get on an airplane, go somewhere else. So it emerged as a kind of a lifestyle choice, which we then supplemented through kind of the people we picked. We have what the HR department really hates it when I say it, but I'll say it anyway. We have an NAA rule at North Highland. No assholes allowed. Because consulting can breed arrogance. And clients don't like arrogance. So when you hire nice people, suddenly that has a big leg up in the relationship. We did something else. Beginning in '98, I'd heard about this thing called an ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Program. It's a way for owners to get money out, tax-free, tax-deferred. It's a way for employees to share in the ownership. And so we started in '98. We went 100% ESOP in 2007. And so the employees own the company. And, you know, if you rent a house or own a house, which one are you going to take care of better? It's the house you own. So I think that the combination of our philosophy of service, the kind of people we hire, backed up by a sharing of the wealth through the stock program, has had a huge impact on retention and people. I mean, people can get paid better in other organizations, but they'll have to travel. And if you're not an owner, if you're not a partner, then you may not share in all the wealth. So we figured out a way to kind of manage that, and I think it's had a big payoff for us. Other questions? Yes.
Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. When you first started the company, did you actually know what it would look like? And if you did know what it would look like, did you know in your mind how long it would take for it to get to what you thought it would look like?
Yeah. No is the answer. People have asked me for many times, did you ever think about being the company we are? Ever? Oh, yeah, but not at the beginning. In the early days, it was about survival. And I remember the original business plan, and I don't show it very often because it's written on my former employer's letterhead, but I was still there as I was thinking about it, was to get to about 30 employees and $5 million in revenue in 10 years. And, you know, the first couple of years, we probably weren't even on track to do that. And then things started coming together, and we started growing rapidly. And at 10 years, we were about 40 million in revenue and 250 employees. And it's not just the revenue, but it's a measure of size. So all of my early thinking never worked, but it's not etched in stone. Our values that we had at the beginning, respect the client, respect the employees, shared ownership, were there from the beginning. And we've been able to refine that. We've done a leadership program internally, and we have a chance to talk to our employees for a couple days. We bring them in as a small group. We talk about our values and our philosophy of service. And going through that process, and I've gone through almost 60 of those sessions over about a 6-8 year period, has helped me articulate and help the current leadership articulate what we're doing. And the employees are a pretty tough crowd because it's not just what you say, it's what you do. Are you walking the walk? And so I think that it's really been a helpful process, but no, it wasn't the original plan at all. It's really evolved from that, and I feel very blessed and grateful to all the people along the way. I have some former alums here, so they can attribute that it wasn't perfect. One of my other sayings is, don't read your own press releases, because it's not necessarily true what the press release says. It's often about what you're becoming. Going back to this two-job, there's the company today and their company you're becoming, and often the press release is about the company you're becoming. So you're not quite there yet. And the master juggler, the CEO, is the one farthest out on the limb usually, because they realize what the company is today, as well as they have the vision of where the company's becoming, and therefore they've got to live at least half their life in that future world, or the company never becomes. So it's an ongoing challenge for a management team to do that. You want to talk about beer? So, yes. Non-beer, okay, all right.
One thing you said that really struck me is this sort of idea that leaders shouldn't just lead themselves, but they should create leaders who can lead, who then can create more leaders who can lead, and that's how you have a big impact yourself. How do you, what is your thoughts on the best way to do that? I've heard a lot of different people have opinions about it, but I wanted to see what you think.
Well, over time we've developed our value statements. We have an idea of what we're looking for. We have a 2x2 matrix. The secret of consulting is everything can be reduced to a 2x2 matrix, okay? So you have two dimensions you're looking at. What we've discovered is people have a talent dimension, a skill dimension, and they also have a style and cultural fit dimension. And what we've discovered is if you're really strong on the talent and skill dimension, but not strong in our culture, that's really a poison getting into the system. And so the low talent, low culture, that's easy. You should never hire them. The high cultural fit, maybe lower skills, that becomes what we call the puppy dog. You love them, but they need to be trained to go on the paper. They need to have skills that are appropriate to where they should be in the business. And the high is what we call stars, and we've got a lot of stars in our business. It's the one that you hired them because of talent, and something's wrong with their attitude. North Highland really spends a lot of money on people, and we have internal coaches, executive coaches. We have a team-based development system, and we also have some outside help we bring in. We hired this person a number of years ago, and they were a technical whiz. But I heard about this person before he stepped foot in the door that he was going to be a problem. Had a personality issue. So I met him, and I could see where that was coming from. And the team that took him dealt with him as best they could. And then, a few months in, this guy's terrible. I mean, he doesn't respect us. He doesn't respect the client. He has bad manners, But he was a whiz in the technology that he was supporting. So we sent him to our internal executive coach. And she came back after a few months and go, no, not going to make it. So we said, all right, we got one more shot. We sent him out to Dr. Bob. We have an outside psychologist we use that is for the real cases. And this guy had a couple of visits with Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob said, this guy's not going to make it. So we fired him. And we fired him right after we paid him the biggest bonus that we paid that quarter because, again, he was a whiz in the technology, and he was awful. He was a poison. He was a cancer in our company. And he looked up like, what are you doing? I said, we've been talking about this, and it's not going to work. You're just not going to be successful here. And he did not believe it. He was so good. And the Dr. Bob came back and said, let me see if I get this right, that this guy would not work because he had narcissistic personality disorder, which basically means it's all about him. And so that's where one of my early things, it's not about you, got involved, because he did not realize that this was not about him. It was about him working as part of a team to support the clients. And it was a real wake-up call. But it was the right thing to do. And inevitably, when I did that, and he was the one, he's my poster child of bad hires, but I've had a few other bad hires. And inevitably, when you do what you need to do, which is get rid of them, people go, oh, what took you so long? Because they see it. They see it before often the CEO sees it. So again, it's where management steps in. And we love our people, so we try to take care of them. We want to make them better, but sometimes you just can't. And so the best thing to do is once you reach that decision, get rid of them. So. And when we look at folks that we've terminated over time, as a general rule, it's cultural fit, not performance fit. Performance usually, that's tangible. You can look at a bio, a resume, a CV, and really get some sense of that. But only when you work with people do you have some sense of their style and their personality, and that's where the truth comes out.
What's the seasonal beer?
Let me ask a real question here over here, and then I'll come back.
Thanks. Sorry. What's easier to change, and have you ever been able to successfully change a situation like you just described? In other words, if you have somebody that is a great personality fit, but their skills are low, versus the ultra-talented person whose personality is low.
Yeah. Our track record is about a third. So we've had a few of these folks. Again, not quite so bad as this one guy. When we bring them in, we have a career counseling process, and we lay it out. What we find is a third get the message and leave. A third will try and succeed, and a third will try and fail. So I guess our batting average is about a third, which is not bad. And some of our biggest talents have actually come through that process, that if you can get it right, and usually it's something, not as major as this other guy, but something just in the way they treat people or just in their style, that when you point it out to them and you go through a process, a lot of it can be changed. I encourage you. We have pretty high-priced, talented people, and so we want to, retain our investment if we can. And I think it's worth the effort, but recognizing that it doesn't always work. So. Whereas skills, often are easy to build, and so again, that's where we see that if it's a skill deficiency, that can be addressed much easier. People are good at learning things. Peter wanted to know what our seasonal beer is. Thank you very much for asking. So we make Hoplana, an IPA, and we make Laughing Skull, an amber. We have 4 seasonal beers. We just released our summer beer, which is a Hefeweizen called Dog Days. The ad is like jumping into a swimming hole lips first. And we're the oldest craft brewery in Georgia. We celebrate our 20th anniversary this summer. We're going to release our 20th anniversary beer, which is a Imperial Russian Stout aged in bourbon barrels. So if you like big, chewy, flavorful beers, enjoy. So thank you for asking that. He's our banker, by the way. So.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Got a couple more here.
Okay.
Thank you. Our brewery is the Four Hills, redbrickbrewing.com. I'm also involved with another group that's actually I'm very passionate about called Womenetics. So womenetics.com. It's an organization geared towards advancing and accelerating women's leadership roles in corporations and organizations. So I encourage you to look at that. That's not as much fun as the brewery, but potentially much more impactful. And again, Peter's our banker, so Bank of North Georgia is really good with small businesses.
So hopefully this is a good closing question, but as...
We got one more behind it, so it's the next one.
We do? Okay, all right. Well, a good setup for the next gentleman. As you've grown the company, done succession planning, what was the easiest and hardest part about handing the reins over?
Well, it goes back to the concept I learned from my retreat when I asked myself honestly how I was doing as a CEO, how much longer I wanted to stay. I realized that I'm doing okay, but I'm not great. I was actually a much better consultant than I was a CEO, and my passion really is about consulting and problem solving and working with clients. And I also discovered that I didn't want to do it forever. So I, went through a process of thinking about me, what my timing would be, and I looked around and move this out of the way. Looked around, see who was out there, And there were several people vying for the spot. And as you know, because you are still with us, Dan Reardon was a bright young star. He later became president, and he's now CEO, and did a fabulous job in growing our business. And there's other people in the wings. So we're doing some things internally to position ourselves for the next succession, both at the top but also along the way. And so you've got to have some job rotation to get the experiences you need for a career at the top or a career in a different kind of space. So we and lots of other companies have that as a charter. And so one of the things that our board of directors looks at is what is the company doing to make sure we've got people in the pipeline, that they're getting those kinds of experiences so that they will be ready when the time comes. And you never know when the time comes. I'm on a public board, and we just had our board meeting last week, and there was basically there's an envelope that if the CEO gets hit by a bus, here's the pecking order of who you go to. And then that's obviously a board's decision at that time. But it's nice to have thought through, who's out there and who could do it. And then sometimes, again, going back to horses for courses, that the next person up might not be the person needed at that point in time in the organization. So you've got to look around in the organization. And I'd like to think that we've got enough talent in our organization that we've got plenty of successors. Yes, sir. You had a question?
Well, on the, you talked about the two dimensions within the organization. In the example you gave about the person who didn't work out, assessment tools, does the company use any tools currently to your, I mean, I know you're retired, but I mean, that could help avoid some of those.
Yes, so I think the individual I talked about created a need. So with a different set of psychologists, we created a screening questionnaire for culture. And we give it to all employees now, or all candidates. And it's not well, you got a 12, that's not good enough on it. It's basically looking at where they will fit, where will they not fit. And so then the hiring executive can kind of decide, let's dig a little deeper, or, oh my God, this is a red flag. And what we've discovered, surprisingly enough, not surprising, I guess, is that it's a pretty good tool. And we are at our peril when we go, well, I really like him, so even though this says this is going to be a problem, we hire him. Well, sooner or later, that problem comes out. So we use it as a screening tool, and it has helped, keeps the A's out. But we also have a lot of internal development. So everybody has a personal development profile. They meet with their career coach. Again, our executive coaches are still around. So now we're taking the rising stars and giving them further assessment. We use the Berkman tool, which is a well-respected assessment tool for understanding your style and your strengths and your weaknesses. And that's been very helpful in coaching our leaders.
Dave, thanks very much for sharing your advice and wisdom.
My
with
pleasure.
us,
Thank you.
experiences.
Oh,
Yeah. And on behalf of our alumni board, I want to give you this glass sculpture by a local artist, Loretta Eby.
oh.
Thanks very much for spending time
Thank you
with us
very
at
much. I
Third
appreciate it.
Thursday.